Local elections are today, and I have with me another independent candidate in the show today and a friend of the show. I'd like to welcome back Miri Finch. Miri, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me on again.
Really good to have you on. And you're standing as an independent candidate up in Yorkshire. I say up in Yorkshire because I'm down south, so in Yorkshire, I should say. How's it been going? Tell us a bit more about where you're standing and how the campaign has been going this year.
Sure. So I'm standing in a ward called Kurten, and it's the fourth time I've stood as a candidate since 2021, and it's been going better every year. So up until 2020, I was apolitical. I'd never voted. I certainly had never considered standing as a candidate. And I was of the opinion that, it's all rigged, and if voting made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it. But then when the madness of COVID started, I realized I needed to start reevaluating a lot of positions and use any tool that I could in this arsenal to fight back. So when a local friend of mine decided he wanted to start an anti-lockdown political party, I
Mm.
thought this is an avenue I really seriously need to consider. So I did join that political party, Freedom Alliance, and I stood as a
Mm.
candidate for them a couple of times. But subsequently have now become an independent candidate. So this year and last year, I've stood as an independent candidate. And this is all at the local council level. So I haven't stood as an MP or in general elections, but just in my local council elections, in a bid to get some genuine pro-freedom representation on the local councils.
Mm.
Because, of course, as we all know, it was our local councils who were implementing the COVID tyranny. It
Mm.
wasn't Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock going from ward to ward, barking at us all to wear masks. It was the local councils. So if we are able to get genuine pro-freedom representation onto a council, then we do really have a chance of platforming pro-freedom views and challenging any future tyranny the government may want to implement. So I've been going around Kirklees, my ward of Kirkburton. Here's my leaflet here, and distributing that. And a number of friends of mine are also standing in local wards. So we've all been handing out the same kind of generic independent leaflet. And we've also been supporting our friend Jonathan Tilt, who is standing for the West Yorkshire Mayor, which is also tomorrow. And
Mhm.
he's been getting a lot of really good feedback. So overall, the feedback has been very positive, and the impression we're getting from voters is that they're very aware of political corruption and that they really are ready for a change.
Well, that's very exciting. I mean, I know, I'm obviously in the Heritage Party, and we've got some candidates in West Yorkshire as well, one standing in Wakefield and one standing in Kirklees as well, where you are. So, it will be great if they can all get elected and work together after the elections to bring in some common sense to those councils. But yeah, I mean, you made a very, very good point, is that some people would say, oh, don't vote. There's no point in voting. It's not going to change anything, but it does. But why do you think that there is this, you know, it's almost like a mantra that some people say, and it's almost, to me, it's unthinking. It's not. It's doesn't. It isn't true, but it's like a virus, a mind virus that goes around, and it's like it affected the freedom movement, if you like. And a lot of people are now saying, "Ah, not going to vote, not going to vote." When actually, if you don't vote, then you are automatically going to get Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, and Green. That doesn't make any sense to me. Where does this come from, do you think?
I actually think that this belief is sown by the establishment because it serves them very well. Now, obviously, as we all know, until relatively recently, most of us couldn't vote. There were very stringent conditions. You had to be a certain age, you had to be married, you had to own property, all sorts of things.
Hmm.
Most of the population couldn't vote. And there was a big pushback because obviously, when you tell people they can't do something, they say, hang on a minute, I want to do it. So I think the
Hmm.
government realized the most effective way of stopping most people voting wasn't outright to ban it, but to allow them to do it and then cynically sow this belief, oh, it's all rigged. Oh, it doesn't make any difference. So
Hmm.
there's no point in doing it. Because actually, they now then get exactly what they wanted when they used to prohibit a lot of us from voting, which is most of us not voting, but doing it, we believe, through our own free choice. So I just think it's
Hmm.
a more effective way of them implementing this tyranny. And what I have found in my inroads to politics is that they absolutely do not want us voting. They certainly do not want us standing as genuine pro-freedom candidates. And they
Mm.
do things to try and sabotage this. First of all, it's not easy to stand as a candidate insofar as nobody knows how to do it. If you ask the average person, which very much included me until 2020, how do you stand as a council candidate? I wouldn't have had a clue. I didn't even know there were local council elections. And this is all
Mm.
by design, that they haven't taught us this. They didn't give us civics class in school. They don't make this information widely available. And when people say, oh, it's all rigged anyway, they mean in terms of, votes getting shredded or extra fraudulent votes getting added. And that may occasionally happen in some very high profile elections. I don't think that happens at the local council level because I don't think they really have the manpower to do that. But they do try and sabotage it in other ways. So this is very interesting and very, dodgy. We got this booklet which showcases all our mayoral candidates in West Yorkshire. And it's a legal requirement that it goes to every single household. Well, as of Monday this week, thousands of households still hadn't received it. So a couple of the candidates queried this with the post office, and the post office then discovered that they'd misplaced about 100,000 of
Ah,
these booklets.
wow. That does worry me because I know when I have candidates standing in parliamentary elections, you get the Royal Mail do a free delivery. So that this is by law and it's all paid for by the Department for Justice. Well, I don't know why it's that department, but they pay for it. And you are allowed to give the Royal Mail 50,000, 60,000 leaflets, whatever, and they are supposed to deliver them for free. But I've had maybe half of the elections I've done that there have been people who haven't got the leaflets that I've spent a lot of time and money on and given to the Royal Mail. They just haven't gone out. And, someone has actually sent me, from working inside, they have whole dumpsters full of leaflets that people have given them and they haven't handed out. So, it's a little bit hit and miss. You might get someone who delivers the leaflets, but you might get someone who doesn't deliver the leaflets, which I think is absolutely awful because that undermines democracy. It really is appalling if they're supposed to do this by law and then they don't do it because, and you also might get someone who supports a certain party. I mean, in your case with this booklet, it doesn't, it's not going to affect one person or the other because everyone's in the booklet. But it's still everyone should get the booklet, shouldn't they? Which I think is that's a whole other issue. But what have you spoken to in terms of the issues on the doorstep? I mean, from speaking to voters, what are they most concerned about? And who would what not parties but what policies and issues would sway them in terms of their voting?
Well, a major focus at the moment is buses
Oh,
because yeah, there's a lot of kind of semi-rural West Yorkshire villages which are not well served by the buses, and especially for older people or people with disabilities, they're really struggling to get to their appointments. So that's been a major issue, but not just the unreliability of the buses, but actually that they're becoming quite dangerous. A lot of antisocial
mm,
behaviour. And crime happening on these buses. So people were very, very concerned about that. And I think crime in general. One person I was talking to yesterday, he said, our current mayor is the ex-Coronation Street star, Tracy Brabin,
mm.
and she has claimed, she's done all these wonderful things to tackle crime. But he said, actually, we're one of the worst boroughs for crime in the country. That's really not working very well. So that I think was a major concern for people. What is interesting is there's not much concern about things like lockdown or anything connected to COVID because I think people
Mm.
assume that's all over now, and that's not coming back. So we have tried to have the conversations with people that there is a possibility of this coming back, maybe in the shape of climate lockdowns. So it is important that we get candidates in place who will protect our
Mm.
rights. If the national government tries to push in another lockdown, we'll protect small businesses, protect our right to travel. So we have tried to introduce those conversations and I think get people talking about those issues again.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. The media really controls a lot of what people think, don't they? So the media gives the impression, oh, COVID's over, lockdown's over, now we're all free, everything's back to normal. And so people move on in their minds. And I think people are bamboozled by so many things coming at them every single day that it just overwhelms people. They can't keep all of these things in their mind as though, everything is important at the moment. So That's another way that people are swayed as well, and they always, bring up this idea of, well, there's just two main candidates or three main candidates, and there's no point in voting for anybody else because they don't have a chance in the first past the post system. Do you find that, or are people sort of breaking out of that and actually now looking beyond Tory and Labour?
Yeah, I think they are. So yesterday, I was at a stall in Wetherby, and we were doing some last minute campaigning for Jonathan Tilt as the West Yorkshire mayor,
Mm,
and a surprisingly large number of people came up to us and said not only that they knew who he was, but that they'd already voted for him by postal vote.
right.
Um, and this is something we haven't really encountered when we've stood in previous years. So it suggests that people are becoming much more open-minded. Um, and I think an interesting issue, with this booklet, you're right, it's got all the candidates in, but people, as you say, already know the main candidates. They definitely know Tory and
Ah,
Labour. They usually know Lib Dem. So actually, these booklets are much more important to the smaller candidates who people may not have heard of yet. So, in an establishment that wants to maintain its monopoly, it would make perfect sense that they would try and sabotage this booklet going to everyone. But they may actually have scored an own goal because it's much more productive for people to see your campaign leaflet as close to the election as possible, not,
yes.
2 or 3 weeks before. But having delivered it at the last minute, which they have, it suddenly turned up in everyone's letterboxes this week, that may actually have helped the independent
Ah.
candidates. So, yeah.
That's actually good. Okay, maybe without realizing it, they've shot themselves in the foot, and then that's going to actually help Jonathan Tilt. He's been on the show before as well, so I would recommend him in West Yorkshire. I think that'll be fantastic. Someone who's not beholden to any of the main parties and who is going to actually support freedom and common sense and not bring in low traffic neighborhoods and all this Agenda 2030 stuff that we are as being the climate emergency nonsense that's been pushed by the other parties and councils. Have you got that in Kirklees as well? Has your council declared a climate emergency?
Oh yes, we've got all of that, and there's this very very sinister, I think like 104-page document on the council website, on most council websites, detailing all these things they're going to do to protect the climate, and they're just going to impose all of these unilaterally. No one's voted for them, nobody even knows about them. Yeah, that is absolutely a very big thing here, and something that Jonathan Tilt has been campaigning vigorously against, because although a lot of the COVID measures, at least initially, did get a lot of public support, I don't get the impression there's anywhere near as much public support for all this kind of green tyranny. So
Mm.
this is something that I think we may be able to really open dialogue on and get a lot of support on.
It really is important because it seems most councils all around the country have declared this climate emergency without it actually being properly defined or based on any evidence. I mean, they vaguely point to the IPCC saying that, oh, we've got to make sure global temperatures don't go up more than 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. And then they say, oh, but this means that we're going to do this and this and this and this in our local plan, in our local neighborhood. So, I mean, this is a very good point you make there, that even though people have moved on from lockdowns, many of the same things are being imposed through this climate emergency, but it's being done under the table or through the back door.
Mm.
People don't know about it because people are not engaged, and turnout is really, really low. I mean, turnout for local elections is usually something around 40%, which means 60% of people don't vote. And then they get all of these things imposed on them. So if you're there, I hope you do get elected. That would be
Oh, thank you.
fantastic. What can you do about this and all these things that they're doing in the Kirklees Council?
Well, one thing you can obviously do is try and stand for your local council and vote for genuine pro-freedom candidates.
Yeah.
If everyone on our side who opposes tyranny, whether it's green tyranny or COVID tyranny or whatever, simply went to the polling booth today and voted for the pro-freedom candidate, if they have one,
Yeah.
that person will get elected. And then they would have some real sway in when the next piece of tyranny comes along, in opposing it in a practical and active way.
Mm.
But if people continue to regurgitate, well, it's all rigged anyway, if voting made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it. then there'll never be any pro-freedom representation on the councils. And so they, the establishment, have won. They don't want you to vote. That's why they're making it harder. That's why they've introduced voter ID. They don't want you to.
Mm.
And they want you to believe that you're making an anti-establishment statement by not voting, but actually nothing could be further from the truth.
That is absolutely true. And you are actually playing right into the hands of the establishment by not getting involved in politics. So please, as Miri says today, go out and vote. And if you can, next time, get more involved. Stand to be a candidate, either with me in the Heritage Party or as an independent. With Jonathan, he's doing some things to help independents. Jonathan Tilt as well. It's the Vote Freedom Project. I think you're involved in that as well, aren't you, Miri? I think.
Well, not officially, but I have,
Okay.
shared it and promoted it. And what the
Yeah.
Vote Freedom Project does is it just gives people the resources to explain to them how to stand as a council candidate, how to get the forms, how to get the
Yeah.
nominations. So it just walks you through it. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it isn't that hard, to be honest. I mean, the first time you do it, it's a little bit daunting because you've got 6 forms you have to fill in. But, I do a training session with my candidates. We go through it in half an hour and everyone understands what to do pretty much. And for local elections, you only need 2 nominating signatures now rather than 10. So it's a lot easier than it was before. And it's free. For locals, you don't have to pay, so there's no money involved either. So anyway, Miri, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I wish you the very best in your election today, and I hope you do get elected onto Kirklees Council. Please do go out and vote today for Heritage Party or Freedom independent candidates.